We're on live. We are live. Welcome, everyone that's here locally and those who may be online as well for our continuing class of the Sermon on the Mount. And we are now in Matthew 5:33 through 37. This is kind of a little bit of a change here, at least maybe a little bit of a let up here, because the last few sections have been they cut to the heart. We're talking about divorce and adultery and murder, and these are some pretty powerful things that we've been talking about. And then all of a sudden, Jesus brings up a different subject that maybe it's at least to us today maybe isn't as powerful as it was to them back there. And he basically going to be talking about oaths and vows. So. And vows. Oaths and vows. It's interesting because we kind of think about this. What we're going to be talking about is how it really affected the people back then, or what they had to deal with, and maybe how it affects us today, and maybe look at it a little bit different. I like that one of the commentaries I was looking at says, basically here it says, Jesus demonstrates the righteousness and harmony. That righteousness and harmony is not a matter of oaths, but plain honesty and simple truth-telling. And that's kind of what I could say that, we could say class done. That's really what we're going to get to in the end here. It's also interesting to look at that there's no parallel account of Jesus doing this teaching himself in any other gospel as well, where some of the others that it's talked about. It is talked about actually his brother James in his book, and we'll get to that as well, where James actually takes a little twist on it as well. But let's go ahead and turn to Matthew 5:33 through 37. Again, a short little statement here. And I'm going to read out of, I'm not sure exactly what text this was, but there's or what version this is, but there's a couple different versions that you may have. A few little words here that may seem a little different. But it says, again, you have heard that the ancients, or in your version may say people long ago, were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great kings. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything beyond that is of the evil one. And your version may say, make your yes be yes, and your no be no as well. We may be a little more common with that. Kind of a short statement there, but if we start here at the first, we see that, again, that Jesus moves the subject from making promises or vows or oaths. He addresses the matter at the heart level here. Again, he says, again, you have heard that the ancients were told, or people long ago were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. What do you think that means? Any thoughts? Again, this is something that was real common back then that we don't really think about much today. Tracy?
I don't know about anybody else, but I made a vow to the Lord when my mother was taking care of my children and I wasn't there, that I would take care of her till the day she died. And I kept that vow because I made it to God, not to anybody else.
Okay. Roger? Well, I don't know if Roger was, yeah. Okay. Sorry, Rita.
In the Old Testament, there was the Nazirite vow, and it extended into the New Testament, where you made a vow to God, and during that time, there were certain things that you did not do. And when your vow was completed, then you had a you went to the temple and there was some ceremony. You could cut your hair and this type of thing, showing that your vow had been completed. And that was one of the vows that was made to God.
Okay, great. Roger?
Well, Minda and I made vows to each other a long time ago, and those vows still have meaning. But I don't see that today having the same meaning as it once did. And it's kind of sad, but I take it very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, what I'm seeing here is, again, we're talking about what you really kind of talked to definitely back then. It's easy for us to think of, and if I was to say, what vows do you think we've done here? In our own time, we can probably come up with vows. We definitely can. So, Mike,
if you think back to the frontier days of the North American continent, you only had a man's word really to depend on. Paper and writing implements to draw up a formal contract were scarce, and a lot of people were illiterate. So, as in that time, a handshake or a man's word was all you really had to go on. You could have a witness, and that had some strength, but in its very basic form, truth or a contract is just your word.
well, that's probably a good point, because really, let's think 2,000 years ago. Was there any basic contracts around that people would use? No, there really wasn't. I mean, it was more this. You come before someone and you say, I'll make an oath that I'm going to pay you back. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. And the other thing with this, it wasn't just that. There was a consequence if you didn't.
Well, there was putting your hand on the inner thigh and promising these things, and all that's in, I think, Leviticus.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we'll look at a few of these things here, what it really meant back in the ancient times. Dave?
Mike brought up the the word bond. In the Bible, we learn that the words that come out of our mouth have more meaning than most of us, especially today, give them credit or value of. People just say things to say them anymore. People don't understand the power behind the words that come out of their mouth. God spoke and the world was. He didn't say, I'm going to fill out this form and then once I've signed and we're good and the world can be. He spoke.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, it's obvious as we're going through this that there was obvious problem of going on here, and that's why he had to address this.
Oaths and vows, maybe in this context, has to do something with God and about God or for God. And I got this from Chris, but an oath refers to a promise made in God's presence to another human party, whereas a vow refers to a promise made directly to God. So I don't know if in this particular context we're talking about what my oath or my vow is before God, and I kind of get it confused with covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think about Abraham, when he made the covenant with Abraham, he laid the body or the pieces of the animal out, then God floated with those ashes and that incense. So
Right.
that is a covenant, though. That is probably different than an oath. But
Right.
I think we need to take it seriously. And that's what Jesus is also talking about.
But also part of it was that the religious leaders would tell the people, if you're going to make a public vow in God's name, you have to keep it. But if they made a vow to just somebody in everyday business and they said, well, I swear by Jerusalem, I swear by heaven, it wasn't a binding vow. And so usually it was a way they could get out of it, get around it, and not be held accountable for it.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we'll get into that. In fact, so why don't we do this? Because there seems to be, is the question also is there a difference between an oath or a vow? Is there really a difference?
I think of an oath as being a one-way thing. I promise you this, whereas a vow and a covenant tend to be two-way.
Now also what we're doing here is we're thinking what we today, 2,000 plus years ago, mean what we think a vow and an oath is. So yeah, what do you think? Is there a difference? And if there is, what do you think it is? Because well, I did look into this. And I want to maybe see if we can clarify that because maybe they thought of it a little bit different. You know, it's the way that we assume things today is not the way that they did things 2,000 years ago. And obviously, again, there was a problem where Jesus wouldn't have even have had this in here. It was a big problem. It wasn't just, oh, by the way, let me just sneak this in here because I thought it would be a good thing to say. It was happening rampantly. From one of the things I was saying, that people would basically say something, but try to get, like Chris said, try to get out of it. Well, here's how I get out of it. Here's how I get out of it. Because it was, you know, if we look back in Leviticus, and this is some very powerful stuff that God told his people, you know, if you're going to do this, this is what you have to do. But first of all, oaths and vows, they can be used as synonyms, definitely. I mean, and they do in our society especially. But I tried to see if I could maybe find some differences. So I looked at some different variations of it. And this is kind of what I tried to come up with to see that, make it as simple as possible. So an oath is a solemn promise that one seriously intends to fulfill, and if not, to accept certain consequences if that something was not fulfilled. Let me say it again. An oath is a solemn promise that one sincerely intends to fulfill, and if not, to accept certain consequences if that something is not fulfilled. Okay? Simply like, it was used often as an assurance that a person would do what they said and are telling the truth. It was, of course, and is still commonly taken before an institutional authority. Tell me some of the things that maybe you today. What do we use oaths for? Court, definitely, don't we? Yeah, we see that in court. Military. If you're in the military, you have to give an oath, don't you? Yeah, you have to give an oath to a military enlistment oath that you have to say this certain thing.
Professional ethics.
Professional athletes have an oath too. I didn't know they did. Did they? That's one of them. But is it? I mean, how is that?
Physicians.
The Hippocratical oath.
The
said, yes,
Hippocratic
yeah.
oath. I believe probably when you receive your law degree.
Yeah, Mark isn't here. I'm sure there's one. Is that called a Hippocratic oath as well? Or is it
And
just
as an
physician?
engineer, I had to take an oath or a professional commitment.
Right. So again, the thing is, you said it how important it was, and that there would be consequences if you didn't do it, right? I mean, if you left the military, there was a consequence, right? You're saying that you're going to serve the military and you're going to stand up, and you're going to do what this asks for. If not, you have to suffer the consequences, and that's kind of really an oath back then as well. I mean, if it wasn't just, yeah, I promise to do this. Okay, if you don't, no, there was consequences for that. We also see we have a presidential oath. I know that, when we swear a president in, he takes an oath, and used to always put their hand on the Bible. I don't know if that kind of changed, but all government employees have to take an oath? Really? Okay. Oh yeah. All right. So it's interesting to see that we are still using that today, and it still means exactly kind of the same thing. That's really what it meant back then as well. But I think just in normal everyday, we don't really see a lot of it. Again, it is something that is done. I guess again, the majority of us, when we were hired for our job, didn't have to take an oath. We will do what the company says. But if it's a government or an institution or something that requires it. Now, why do you think they even require to do that? What would be the why? Why take an oath?
There's something about hearing yourself say it and having witnesses to it that it's more difficult to back down. Not so much in politics. We seem abide on truthfulness. We even talk about political promises, and in doing so, diminish their validity.
Mm-hmm. And Ray, what did you say again? Why? An allegiance. Okay. Any other reason why you think, I mean, what's the power behind an oath if you say something, Bill?
I run a training program at work, and we bring people in from outside or maybe promoted up from lower jobs and run them through this training program. And one time we ran into one of the trainees with an attitude, and his trick was to when it would come time for an assignment be turned in or a test taken that he didn't study for or something, he'd say, "Well, I didn't know I had to do that. You never told me I had to do that." So we had to put together a document that explained what it meant to be in this training program and the things that were required. And now we have all the trainees sign that before they start the training program. So they can't say, "Well, I didn't know."
Okay, so that's not, I guess it's not, they're not taking an oath, but they're at least, they say, you have to read this, signing something over. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So again, so we have a few people here that have taken an oath. You've taken an oath. Billy, you've taken an oath. Oh, here's Mark. What sort of oath did you have to take to be a lawyer?
Be mean.
Be mean?
Yeah. Well, we have to be, I don't remember, it was 40 years ago, but, to be ethical, we have a professional code of conduct, and to be ethical, follow those.
Isn't it like
To
a bar
be,
exam oath or something? Is that what it is?
Pardon?
Isn't it like the bar exam or something? Do you have to take an oath?
No, after you pass to, there is I actually have it framed, but an attorney's oath that you do.
See, yeah. So it was something that was important enough to even have framed, and I think some people do maybe have their oath framed because hey, I took this. This is very powerful. So now we move on to a vow. Again, very similar and can be used. In fact, a lot of Bibles, if you look at they might put vow and they may put oath in. It's kind of, and we kind of think it's the same. So a vow was a promise solemnly sworn to bind or consecrate by. You consecrate by a vow. Thus, vows were and are often made in belief that they encourage divine favor, which is probably the only difference I could see. You usually take a vow. This is something that you say, "I'm taking this between me and God," or between us and God. What's the most common vow that we take nowadays that we could use that example on? Marriage. We always, we don't say our marriage oaths. We call them our marriage vows because it's between us and God. Now, is it any less different? Is it any less powerful? Any less say, well, an oath's an oath, but a vow is a vow. No, they're both and the thing is back then, they were taking oaths with and using God's name. And that's where I think a lot of the problem came into, because again, they could take an oath and use God's name or something that was standing. Like, this mountain, I'll take an oath on this mountain. Nowadays maybe we hear, and it's also like I swear by. A lot of times you hear, well, I'll swear on a stack of Bibles. Or I'll swear on my mother's grave, or I'll swear, we come up with all of these different things now that we say to say, well, I'm telling the truth. And here's how you can tell I'm telling the truth, is because I'm taking it this far that I will say this. Rita.
I know you're going to get to it, but it's a sad situation when you have to swear, promise, make a vow that what you're saying is true, since everything out of your mouth actually should be true.
Well, so like I said, that's I could just get up here and say that and the class would be over with, because that's really what Jesus was getting to. I mean, yeah. So we can all leave right now. We can leave it a little bit early. You are home, can go next cup of coffee. But no, that's exactly what he was getting to. It was getting so rampant and out of people would just do it just because it was nothing. Which again, it's sad that's the case. So let's wanted to just again to try to get this, maybe again getting understanding when he says the people of old or the ancients, what they had to deal with. Again, a little bit difficult for us, but I want to look at these three places in the Bible where we can actually see where it's written about this. So if maybe someone's already turned to something, but anyone got Leviticus 19:12? Leviticus 19:12? Billy?
You shall not swear by my name falsely, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord.
Hey, so again, talking about the truth, you should not lie by my name falsely, swear by my name falsely, or profane. I mean, that's basically taking God's name in vain. I am the Lord. Numbers 30-2. Roger's got it.
If a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word. He shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth.
Again, that's one of the laws they had. That was one of the laws that you see in Numbers. I mean, it's kind of like, again, let's make it clear what you're supposed to use them for and what you're not supposed to use it for. And Deuteronomy.
If you make a vow to the Lord your God, do not be slow to pay it, for the Lord your God will certainly demand it of you, and you will be guilty of sin.
Yeah, my version says, when you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it, for it would be sin in you, and the Lord your God will surely require it of you. That's some pretty powerful messages. Do you really think you want to do this oath? Do you really think you want to make this vow? I mean, I think initially that's, it was used very cautiously, but it became to a point where it was, as we'll get to with Chris said, people were just making them, especially the Jewish people were saying, well, how can we get out of it? How can we make this a little bit not so binding? We also see in Solomon, where it says in Ecclesiastes 5-4, Moses is echoed by Solomon. It says, when you make a vow to God, do not be late in paying it, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you should not vow than you should vow and not pay. And that's kind of really what Jesus is getting to here. It's better to not say a vow. It's better just to make your yes be yes and your no be no. Don't even take a vow. So you don't even have to worry about that. So it's always from these verses that God takes his name seriously. Do you think he still takes it as serious today as he did back then? For I, God, never change. But do you think a lot of people think, well, God's kind of softened up a little bit. We can use his name. We can. It's not as bad. No. It's just as powerful today. Do you think it's important to tell the truth today more than it was back then? We should tell the truth constantly. Do you think our society has a hard time with that? Do you think we can find ways to get around telling the truth? Yeah, but this happened. I didn't have any control about this. It was interesting. I had once where my next door neighbor, there was some land that we had that was actually owned by when we had a farm area back behind us, and a dad owned the farm area, and his one son owned our house, and the other son owned the house next to us. So property lines are skewed and where they build fences. But anyway, come to find out that maybe 4 feet by 80 feet of that was on my property was their property. And the guy came to me and says, "Would you be interested in buying this property?" I said, "Sure. Okay." We worked out a deal, shook his hand, and we agreed upon it. And then the neighbor next to him, their fence wasn't up. Anyway, one day he came over and he says, "What's this? I heard you're going to buy this, but you don't have to buy that property from that guy. It's been there for over 25 years. It's already, you don't have to. It's yours. It's just yours. You don't have to pay for it." But I said, "No. I made a vow or promise, whatever, that I would buy this property. I wasn't, I could have went back and said, hey, Bill over here told me that I don't really have to buy this property. I'm just going to take it. So sorry, it's mine. It's if you want, take me to court, whatever." But it's little things like that we tend to try to find ways that we think are right, and legal. I mean, this guy knew what he was talking about, to try to get out of promises that we make to people. And I don't care if they're small promises or big promises. The world today really tells us, are you sure? Yeah, I bet you can get out of that. I bet there's a way of getting out of that. Let's just find that way, which is kind of a sad thing that we've come to. And again, it doesn't just happen today, but it happened back then.
This is how we get into the predicament of half truths or half lies.
White lies.
Or white lies.
Exactly.
A while ago, Jeff, you did a series on integrity. I listened to the presentation from. I think he was one of the lead investigators in the failure of the space shuttle, and he talked about shortcuts and the way we as human beings, our nature is to if we don't get burned the first time, we figure that's a viable way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we know that that's not the right way to do things. And that was essentially a domino effect that ended up in loss of life in the space shuttle, because there was a subpar component that was allowed to persist over a long period of time. And it just wasn't any longer. It was so pervasive that it was just identified as something that could pass, that it obviously didn't need to be up to spec anymore. I'm sure Ray saw it in his time with the government in safety violations and so forth. Some of it can be ignorance. I mean, we learn as a species as time goes on, but when it goes back to the passage, if you know to do good and you don't do it, that's sin.
Exactly. So, Rita.
But even the legal system allows lying, because certain lies they call puffing and exaggeration, and other lies they call fraud. And you're only in trouble if you've actually done fraud. You can you can lie all you want, as long as it's just puffing, but it's still a lie, and you can get by with it. And like I said, the legal system allows it.
Yeah, Dave. It's interesting because there's a fine line now. Again, you get on media, anything online, you hear someone say something, you're thinking that it's truth. But you're hoping that it's true, but you don't know, and they really could care less whether what's their truth. And this whole thing about, well, truth is very fluid. Maybe it's just all depends. But
if we go back to Deuteronomy 23, verse 23, talks a little bit more about that. It says, "That which goeth which is gone out of thy lips, thou shalt keep and perform, according as thou hast vowed unto the Lord thy God, which thou hast promised with thy mouth." Today, people just get flippant. It's like, well, I just say things because that's what you want to hear.
yeah,
Or
that's another thing,
because
just what you want to
it's
hear.
nice.
I'm going to tell you what you want to hear.
But if we say it, the stuff that we say, we should do.
Yeah, it's sad because, really, God takes his name seriously, and God takes truth seriously. And for us to be flippant about that and not take that to heart, just like the people back then, that's not what you should be doing. Anyone who violates an oath, they said, they made it by invoking the Lord's name would be punished. There's the initial thing. But like Chris said, I'll get to you, Roger, just one sec. I'll get to you. It says, so what people start doing, and this is why he said, even, but I say, make no oath by the, what did it say here? Let me get back to it. Make no oath at all, either by heaven or by the throne or by the footstool. They were using all different types of things to try to tie into where they can kind of back out of it. which they, again, we find those same sort of things nowadays, Roger.
I forget how many pages there are in the Bible, but God takes sin very seriously, and there's a whole bunch of pages to back it up.
That's for sure. So again, kind of getting this, I mean, do we put much weight in vows and oaths today? Most people don't, huh? I mean, even wedding vows. I mean, how, what is the 50%? You know, I mean, yeah, but I doubt they ever, when it goes to the thing, well, yeah, but you took this vow. That was just, pomp and circumstance. That was just what we had to do back then. We just did that, but I didn't mean any of it. It's really kind of what it is, Mike.
I know we sort of look on the dark side of humanity and say, yeah, everybody lies. But if we do that, we're voicing an expectation that we don't trust each other. And there is there's at least a hypothesis that people rise to your level of expectation. If you make an agreement with someone expecting them to be untruthful, they're more likely to be untruthful than if you express your fidelity in your half of the negotiation, your half of the contract. Then they are more likely to rise to your expectation. Particularly among Christians, I think we have an obligation to be absolutely upfront with each other. Not that we don't with others too, because that's the example we must set. But if we show the world that we don't trust each other, and therein is the commandment, don't take each other to law if it can be avoided.
Right.
Because that doesn't reflect well on our leader, our shepherd, Jesus Christ. If his followers don't show compassion with one another and show truth telling to one another.
Exactly. Very powerful.
So we need to be careful not to be too jaded in our
it's sometimes hard not to bring the world into our thinking.
well, sure.
Yeah. Because
Human nature.
Someone told me about this, and maybe I had to make sure I'm sure. But no, I like this little saying that a guy says that the teachings of Jesus hit us where we live. We cannot stand as imposters before him for even 1 second. We may be able to lie to ourselves and lie to other people, but we can never stand before God or Jesus for 1 second and go, you didn't tell me that, or I didn't know that. Honesty and simply telling the truth is what Jesus is preaching here. Honesty and simply telling the truth. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. In Matthew 12:35-37, it says, the good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. But I tell you that men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word that they have spoken. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Some powerful things, really, if we sit and listen, think of those sort of things. 1 Corinthians 25. For the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom and the weakness, than the man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than man's strength. So, I like these little short, little small, because they're just right to the point, just exactly to the point. Also, just as we're closing, we're going to get done a little early here today. Another little statement says, a man should never be ashamed to own he has been in the wrong. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say, I made a mistake. I'm my fault. My bad. So a man should never be ashamed to own he has been in the wrong, which is by saying, in other words, that he is wiser today than he was yesterday. Shouldn't we continue to learn? And it's okay to say, I made a mistake. I learned from that. Again, we just have a hard time doing that in our society. We have a hard time just owning up to it if we made a mistake. We always try to find ways and loopholes and ways out of it. And I just can't admit it. I just can't admit it. A very difficult thing to do, but it's okay to be wrong. Mike.
I don't say it enough, but I have said, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done what I did. And that may bear on our oaths and vows as well. There are things that we don't know when we agree to something, and it may be to our detriment, or it may be to everyone's detriment to go ahead and follow through with that. I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. We don't know, but a decision was made to do that, and with I think righteous motivation, given the considerations at the time. And I'm not going to second guess that, but there are agreements that we make that need to be amended, given the reality of the situation as it comes to light. And but we need to explain that. We need to, as you say, own our naivete or our misinformation or our ignorance when we do that.
Right. Wouldn't it be nice again on on your epitaph or on your tombstone? He was a man of his word. He was a woman of her word. How powerful is that? And even if you have to, I'll take the consequences. I'll, do whatever. Yes, I made it. I'll take the consequences to that. How powerful is that? If we know people that are like that, it just brings so much more, how much more trust do we have in a person like that knows that they made a mistake, they paid the consequences. And again, we're all sinners, right? We all make mistakes. And if we own up to it, that's just it's so much easier to say that you put that person at a higher level of trust as well. Again, I wanted to close out with, sorry, Rita, go ahead. Did it happen? Go off? I didn't.
When I had the birth center in Murray, there were 4 of us business partners, and one of them actually accused me of being pathologically honest.
Oh, that's a great
and
accusation.
I thought, how can honesty be a pathology?
Yeah.
But she did accuse me of that.
Well, so like I said, it's the only real place this kind of shows up again is Jesus' brother James. In James 5, when he's talking about patience and suffering, in verse 12 he says, "Above all, my brothers, do not swear by heaven or by earth or by anything else," which is really what you can tell he was there and he listened to his brother. "Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you will be condemned." Simply a powerful word. So great. Thank you so much for your time today. And let's go ahead and have a closing prayer real quick, and we'll go ahead and dismiss. Most wonderful and gracious God, we do just want to come before you today and thank you for the beauty of this day. Thank you for the beauty of your word. Thank you for the power, the simplicity, the goodness and glory that only comes from you. We thank you for this being able to look at your word here today, dear Father, and help us to take that with us as we leave here, that we may learn to be more truthful, to be more honest, and to know how powerful and wonderful that is in your eyes, dear Father. Be with us the rest of this day as we continue on. Help us to be more Christ-like in all that we do, dear Father. And as we worship here today, help us to put the world aside and help us to lift our thoughts and our devotion to you, and let your Spirit flow through us today, dear Father. It's in Christ's name we do pray. Amen.